ঠিক আছে,
আসসালামু আলাইকুম
ঠিক আছে, হয়ে গেছে। আপনারা আর ইয়ে না করি, কথা না বলি, হয়ে গেল। তাহলে আমি একটু আমাদের শ্রদ্ধেয় স্যার, আমাদের প্রধান নির্বাহী ইনস্টিটিউটের, আমি স্যারের অনুমতি নিয়ে 2 থেকে 3 মিনিটে দু একটা কথা বলে আমি বিদায় নেব। So dear students, by this time I have met the objectives before you, such that today's session is very important for all of you. Not only that, it will be very beneficial for you to cover the whole area of taxation. This session is a special session, overall session, which also given in your further study manual, and will be needed the references that those topic or area will be covered by our topmost resource persons, our guardian, and also the chief executive of this institute, our Sir Babu Subhashish Bose here. Sir ki chilen? He was the former senior secretary of Ministry of Commerce, Government of Bangladesh. Also cadre, starting from cadre taxations, and so he is also an expert specialized on taxation and devotee of this subject, I think myself. So it's a great or the real opportunity, all of you. Please also advance on taxation, not only honorable sir, and success in this subject in the exam. তাহলে আমরা এখন কি করব? স্যারের সেশন শুরু হবে। আমি অলরেডি কথা আগে বলে দিয়েছি। আমাদের যারা ক্যাপ্টেন আছেন, you will also respond and make sure of your full cooperation to our honorable guest faculty. আমরা সেই ব্যক্তিত্বকে এখানে এনেছি, আমরা সেই পোটেনশিয়াল রিসোর্সই আমাদের সম্মুখে, যিনি আমাদের ইনস্টিটিউটকে কর্ণধার হিসেবে, একজন গার্ডিয়ান হিসেবে, আমাদের অভিভাবক হিসেবে নিয়ে যাচ্ছেন। কাজেই হি ইজ নাও ইন প্র্যাকটিক্যাল আপনাদের সামনে। আপনারা ইউ আর দ্য জিস্ট অফ দ্য বেসিক অফ দিস প্রফেশন। আমি স্যারের সাথে বলেছি যে নিউ ফ্রেশার সকলে, স্যার সব অকিপাল আছেন। আপনাদের প্রয়োজন হবে দুটো জিনিস, মাই ডিয়ার স্টুডেন্টস, বিশেষ করে আমাদের ছেলেরা যারা, মেয়েরা, স্যার ম্যাডাম আর কি, সেটা হচ্ছে স্যারের যে হুইচ উইল বি টট ফর দ্য কন্ট্রিবিউশন অ্যাজ লেকচার্স, আপনি মন দিয়ে শুনবেন। সেকেন্ড হচ্ছে এই আনুষঙ্গিক যেগুলো আনমিউট করে রাখবেন, শুনে নেবেন। সেকেন্ড হচ্ছে স্যার যেটা বলবেন, অ্যাজ অ্যান্ড হোয়েন আস্কড অফ দ্য কোশ্চেনস অফ দ্য রিলেভেন্সি, ইউ উইল হ্যাভ টু রেসপন্স দেয়ার। আগে বাড়িয়ে আগে করে এগুলো কথা না বলে মূল্যবান সেশনটা আমরা সেইভাবে ইউটিলাইজ করব, আবার চুপ করে বসে থাকবো না। আমি স্পেশালি অদিতি দিদি, সজীব বাবু এবং আমাদের রবিউল সকলকে বলবো, যারা ক্যাপ্টেন আছেন তাদের সাথে বলবেন যে পরিচয় দিয়ে আমি যাওয়ার পরে যে স্যার আমরা ক্যাপ্টেন এই, আর স্যারকে এই বিষয়ে অলরেডি আমি বলে রেখেছি যে স্যার আমাদের এখানে ক্যাপ্টেন্স আছে, we will also carry of your total session। এই না, স্যারের সাথে আপনারা সকলেই ইয়ে করবেন, স্যার যখন ওপেন ডিসকাশন যদি হি অলসো লাইক অর টু সেনশন, সেই সময় আপনারা সার্বিকভাবে ইয়ে করবেন। এই আর আপাতত বলার কিছুই নাই, একটাই কথা যে আমাদের ইনস্টিটিউটের প্রধান নির্বাহী যিনি, তিনি আপনাদের সামনে, এবং বিষয়টা আপনাদের সামনে সব পরিষ্কার হয়ে যাবে। আপনারা অনেক কিছু স্যারের কাছে পাবেন। স্যার আপনাদের জন্য এখানে 3 দিন তো সময় বরাদ্দ রাখবেন, তারপরে উইল গো টু অলসো টাচ এন্ড কিপ কন্ট্রিবিউশন আদার 3 সেকশনস। এই 3 দিন আসবেন স্যার, যে 3 সেশনেই ডিটাচ ফুললি ফ্রম রেগুলার ক্লাসেস। মাই ডিয়ার স্যার এন্ড ম্যাডাম, আমাদের রেগুলার টিচাররা কি পড়াচ্ছেন এগুলো ওনাদের পড়াবেন, ওনাদের আঙ্গিকে পড়াবেন। স্যারের সাথে এখানে সম্পৃক্ততা নেই। স্যার কি কভার করবেন সেটা তো বলেই দিলাম, সার্বিক বিষয়, and we'll try to make sure of your proper knowledge which will be required or as urgently needed for spread or acquiring of your knowledge in practice further exam. তো থ্যাংক ইউ, দোয়া থাকলো সবার জন্য, ছাত্র ইয়েরা, দিদি, অদিতি দিদি,
জি ভাই, ভালো
আপনারা
থাকবেন।
আর স্যারকে আমি বিনীত জানাচ্ছি, স্যার আমি মনে হয় আপনি অনুমতি নিলে আমি যাই, বিদায় নিই, আর আপনি শুরু করেন।
ওকে
ওকে
আর টেকনিক্যাল সমস্যা হলে
থ্যাংক ইউ।
অদিতি দিদি আমাদের
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
অনলাইনে এমদাদ আছে, ওইভাবে ইয়ে করেন।
হুম।
আর সকলে ভালো থাকেন, পরিবারের সাথে থাকেন বুঝে সুঝে, আর নামাজে একটু বিরতি নিয়ে নিয়েন স্যারকে বলে, আর স্যার সবই জানেন, অসুবিধা হবে না। আল্লাহ হাফেজ, মে আল্লাহ
স্যার আদাব, ভালো থাকবেন।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম। জি আদাব।
আসসালামু আলাইকুম স্যার।
থ্যাংক ইউ। আল্লাহ।
Okay.
জি স্যার।
হ্যাঁ স্যার।
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes,
Good
sir.
afternoon
Yes,
to
sir.
you all. Okay. Let us.
Good afternoon.
I have already been informed about your status. That means you all are freshers, what I understand. And this is certificate level course. Of course, you have to start with that. And I have already given a handout to Mr. Dulhali for onward distribution towards all the students. I believe that most of you have got it. If not, there is no problem. You can collect it from Mr. Later on. But have you gone through that? That's the first thing what I would like to ask you. If you have gone through that, then it will be much easier for you to understand what will the income tax norms. You have to go through that. So is always available in the country, especially the law book houses. Whether you have got it or not, I do not know. If you do not have it, then you please collect it later on from any law book house. But before we start the income tax, there are some matters where the income tax actually come from. Income tax actually comes from the public finance theory. So we have to know about the public finance theory here. And if you go through the handout, you will find. First of all, there might be a question, what a tax is. That might be a general question. Anybody can ask you what a tax is. So if you go through the handout, you will understand that this is the most important source of revenue of the government. If a country has to run feasibly, definitely it has to depend on revenue. Where the revenue comes from? The revenue comes from tax. Tax includes many things. We will be understanding that later on. We will be discussing in detail, maybe direct tax, maybe indirect tax, etc. So in general, you can say that tax is one of the most important sources of revenue, is the question. And the act of levying tax is called taxation. So if somebody asks you what a taxation is, then the answer is the act of levying taxes is taxation. So there is a difference between the two, the tax, the term tax, and the term taxation. Okay. And another thing comes automatically. Tax is a compulsory charge. It's not optional. That you must know. It means compulsory in the sense that if you have income, you have to pay taxes. And it is imposed by the government on many entities. We will be discussing the entities later on. As person, you will find a term which is called person in the Income Tax Ordinance 1984. So who is a person? If somebody asks you who is a person, you have to answer that it is not only an individual. But in general term, we understand by person that it's an individual, a human being, a man or a woman. But in the Income Tax Ordinance 1984, there is an inclusive definition for person. A person includes, it is said there, a person includes an individual, a firm, an association of persons, a Hindu undivided family, a company, a local authority, a fund, an artificial juridical person, etc. So you will be understanding that later on. So when you are asked about a person, you have to answer in that way, that it is not an individual only, but there are different entities. So the government actually imposes taxes on those entities. Now you can say that the government may impose tax on the individual, impose tax on firm, impose tax on association of persons, impose tax on Hindu undivided family, impose tax on companies, impose tax on corporations, impose tax on local entities, local bodies, and any other entity, whatever it is, maybe even on an artificial juridical person. So that's why it's a compulsory charge or fee. You cannot avoid that. You cannot escape that. You have to pay it. If you say, I am not having that much of income, so why should I pay taxes? Yes, you have to pay taxes irrespective of the return in terms of goods or services to be paid by the government. Even the government does not pay you anything, you have to pay taxes to the government. Why? That might be a question. You can say that, okay, I am earning from a business, but the income is not very high, and I have to still pay an income tax on that. Why should I pay taxes? Because I have invested in that business from my own fund, and I am earning. And I have employed some employees there, and the employees are working for me. I am paying them salaries. So it's absolutely my administration. Why should I pay taxes to the government? What would be the answer? The answer is that even if you do not have a large income or a substantial income, still you have to pay taxes because government is protecting you. You are living in a sovereign country, and because of the sovereignty, there is nobody from another country to interfere in your business. It is the government which is protecting you from foreign intervention, foreign aggression. Government is protecting you from coming the businessmen from other countries. So you are not in competition with them. So that is the benefit you are having from the government. So that's why you have to pay taxes to the government in order to run the administration of the country. So government needs and revenue expenditure. Government is paying salaries to the government employees. So it's a revenue expenditure for the government to be incurred. Government is building roads, highways, flyovers, etc. And government needs, developmental expenditure. So that's why government also needs revenue from the people. But you can say whether the government is fully dependent on revenue or not. No, government is not fully dependent on revenue. Government is also having money from different sources like the International Monetary Fund, World Bank, in the form of soft loans or in the form of hard loans, whatever it is, if needed. Because sometimes there is a deficit in the budget. So that's why in order to meet the deficit of accept the revenues. So if we can meet all the expenditures from the revenue, it's good for the country. Otherwise, we have to pay off the loan. If it is not a grant, then we have to pay off the loans. So if it is a soft loan, it is a little bit better. But if it is a hard loan, then it is sometimes very burdensome on us. So can you tell me one thing? Why we should not go for loans? What are the disadvantages of loans? That is also a very valid question. What are the disadvantages of taking loans from World Bank, IMF, ADB, or from foreign governments? Maybe you are taking the loan at a certain interest. If you think that the interest is not that high, maybe it is 2%. So why not? We should go for taking the loans. But there is a risk. What is the risk? We have to pay off the loan. We have to pay off the principal amount. So if there is inflation, different in 2 years' time. So when the exchange rate is different, we have actually taken as loan from the foreign government would be different when we are paying it off. So maybe $1 billion, we have to pay in $1.2 billion, except the interest because of the exchange rate. So there is a risk of that. That's why it is not good to take loans from the foreign governments or from international organizations. But sometimes this is very much needed for us. We cannot avoid that. So we are going for that. So always we will be going for soft loans and some going for grants. So grant is something which is different from loan. When it is given to us, we don't have to repay it. So that's the benefit in terms of grant. So that's why what you are talking about, that the tax is a compulsory charge or fee imposed by the government on, I would say, on a person. I would not say on an individual or a company or a business concern or a corporation. I would say on a person, whoever he is. The persons who are taxed have to pay taxes irrespective of any corresponding return from the goods or services by the government, as I told you before. If there is no return in exchange of your taxes, you have to pay taxes. It's because of the reason I have explained to you why. Okay. Another question may arise, that why should I pay taxes at a certain rate or at a rate which is actually similar to a person who is paying taxes on his higher income? That type of question may also come. So, of course, irrespective of the abilities, we are paying taxes. But there are some theories, and that's why we have to learn about the public finance theory. There are some objectives, of course, of the taxes. That might be a question in the examination. That is, what are the objectives of taxes? Why tax is imposed by the government? Of course, you have to write the answer. The objectives are raising revenue, as I told you before, that revenue is needed by the government. So we need to increase the revenue or raise the revenue. And then regulation of production and consumption. In order to regulate the production and consumption, we have to impose taxes. That means the government has to impose taxes. Because if a person is a businessman, he is an importer, or he is a distributor, or he is a wholesaler, whatever it is, if there is no regulation, then definitely he can fix the price at his whim, at his will. So what would happen? If he thinks that he's a monopolist of a particular product, then he can fix the price at 100% or adding his profit at 75%. That might happen. So regulation is actually needed. That means you have to pay taxes at this rate. Government will say import duty has to be like that. And if the production is such, and at the same time, the perspective is the sense that somebody is manufacturing the product in Bangladesh, and another person, he is importing the product from Korea, same product. So what should the government do? If the government thinks that local manufacturers have to be patronized, local manufacturers have to be given preference, then we have to impose higher duty on the importation of the same product. That means the person who is importing the product from other countries has to pay much higher import duty, patronizing the local manufacturer. So what would be my benefit? What would be the benefit of the government? The benefit would be the consumers will be able to enjoy the product or consume the product at a much lower rate because it is produced in Bangladesh. So there is no import duty imposed on that. Only the manufacturer has to pay VAT, value-added tax. And afterwards, he has to pay taxes on his income. That means income tax or corporate tax, whatever it is. And at the same time, the manufacturer is doing something good for the society or for the country. What is that good? He is making the goods available in the market, number one. And number two, he is generating employment in the country. That means people like you or many laborers also in different forms, people are getting employed in his company. There would be employed in his organization, in his company. So that is a benefit because unemployment is a problem for our country. If you do not find a job after being a chartered accountant or after being a graduate or after being an MBA from the university, then it is a curse on your part. You cannot maintain your family. You cannot maintain your livelihood even. You have to depend on others. So unemployment is a curse. And 2.5 million people of the country are joined the employment cycle every year, which means that 25 lakhs of people are joining the employment cycle, which is a burden for the government. Because the government cannot provide jobs to them fully. Because government has got or services, but government has got a large, but there is a limitation to that because government cannot actually give employments to infinite number of people. It's not possible. So we have to depend on the private sector. And that's why private sector has to be patronized. Private sector has to be encouraged to grow up. So if the private sector grows, then of course they would be able to provide jobs to you, and hence the policy is there. And since I have said to you that regulation of production and consumption, it means that we have to control the companies, the manufacturers, the importers, etc. Later on, there might be another objective, encouraging domestic industries. Encouraging domestic industries means that the local manufacturers have to be patronized. And you will see one thing here in the country, that there is a tax holiday scheme of the government. Tax holiday scheme of the government is that for certain companies, government is giving them facilities for a number of years. That means for that number of years, the manufacturers are not imposed on taxes by the tax department. That means, say, for example, 10 years, 5 years, 7 years, etc. For 7 years period, this kind of manufacturing concerns are not to pay taxes to the government. That is called tax holiday scheme. It means that for those 7 years or for those 10 years, that type of concerns are entitled to exemption of taxes. That means they can save their money. Income is not subject to taxation. Hence, income could be retained by the company. It could be added to the capital, and the net worth will be increased or enhanced. So that is the policy of the government. And stimulating investment, that is one of the objectives, stimulating investment. So we can stimulate investment, we can encourage investment from the local entrepreneurs or from the foreign entrepreneurs. So local entrepreneurs are encouraged to invest in some sectors, productive sectors especially. You will see sometimes that people are actually allowed to invest in their productive sectors in a particular type of company without explaining the source of capital. You please remember very well. This is a very common question, common term for the chartered accountants and cost accountants, that in the budget, government actually announces that anybody can invest in this sector, especially in the productive sector, or the sectors are mentioned in the budget, wherein if you invest a certain sum of money as capital, then you don't have to explain to the income tax authority where you got the money from. Generally, if you want to invest in the business, you have to explain the source of your capital. If you have a capital which is explained or which is explainable, it is good. The income tax authority will not ask any question on that if you give already explanations to the source of the capital. But if you cannot give explanation to the source of capital, the income tax authority, that is the Deputy Commissioner of Taxes, who is responsible for assessment, will definitely ask you a question as to the source of the income. Income means the capital. So it's a very common term. And when you stimulate investment, you can encourage the local entrepreneurs or the foreign entrepreneurs. How to stimulate foreign investment, or how to encourage the foreign entrepreneurs? How to do that? So you will be finding that government has set up export processing zones, special economic zones, private economic zones, etc. So there is a plan of the government to set up 100 special economic zones in the country by the year 2030. And already you will find that export processing zones are there. There are 8 export processing zones in the country. I think it has increased to 10 nowadays, or in the process of increasing to 10. But 8 established export processing zones are here in the country under the BEPZA. BEPZA means Bangladesh Export Processing Zones Authority. So there is an executive chairman of the Bangladesh Export Processing Zones, under whom there are some export processing zones in various parts of the country. And in those export processing zones, the foreign investors are especially welcome. So they are given some facilities like tax holiday scheme, and they are given some facilities like importation of the raw materials at zero import duty. And mostly they are export-oriented companies. So they are given special customs advantages. So the customs advantages are there. That is, processing is very simple, and that's why they find it convenient for them. কথা বোঝা যাচ্ছে না?
না, বুঝতে পারতেছি স্যার।
Low sound or high sound or no sound? Can you tell me?
না, ক্লিয়ারলি শুনতে পাচ্ছি স্যার।
স্যার হয়তো নেট প্রবলেম ছিল তাই।
নেট প্রবলেম হয়তো হতে পারে।
স্যার শোনা যায়, মাঝে মাঝে একটু আর কি সমস্যা দেখা দেয়। এখন ঠিক আছে
স্যার, এখন ঠিক আছে।
Okay. So what I was saying is that in the export processing zones, the foreign investment is always welcome. And there are some benefits given to the foreign investors in terms of customs facilities, etc. Generally, the companies are export-oriented companies. So they are manufacturing the products here in the export processing zones, and then they are exporting the products to various countries of the world. So government is actually receiving export remittances from other countries because of those companies here. So it has actually contributed to the export in country. But you can ask me why the foreign investors would be welcoming to our country. That might be a question that in the examination, definitely you have to answer in that way, that the capital is needed in our country and export income has to be enhanced. And they have got their own technology, they have got their own know-how, and they have got their marketing skills. Marketing skills means while an export-oriented company is exporting their products to the foreign market, they have to know the marketing skills. They have to know the demand of that product in particular areas or particular countries. So they have got their marketing ability since they are engaged in the business for long. So that's why we are inviting the foreign direct investment in Bangladesh, which is called FDI in short term. And that is, we would say, stimulating investment. And then another objective is there, reducing income inequalities. Why tax is imposed? What are the objectives of imposing taxes on different entities? Is that one of the objectives is that reducing income inequalities. So that is actually important to note that income equality is not good for the country, because some people have large income, some people have no income, some people have very little income. So in order to make equalities, at least some sort of equalities, we have to impose taxes on them. What does it mean? It means that we will be imposing taxes on the highest income earners at the highest rate. So if you impose taxes on the levels of income, on the quantums of income at different rates, you will try to minimize the inequality of income. So that is the case. And that's why we are, or the government is imposing taxes on various entities in order to minimize the inequalities. Then promoting economic growth, that is one of the objectives. Of course, there is economic growth in the country. Economic growth is good for the country to compete with other countries of the world or to have a status in the global market. So growth is here in Bangladesh very good. I believe even in the pandemic situation, the growth is more than 5%, that is 5.3%, which is good. But earlier, this was quite high, and that was compared to higher than the neighboring countries of Bangladesh. And government was actually planning to have a growth at 2-digit, that is 10%, which is supposed to be achieved if the pandemic situation is not there and if our export income could be enhanced. Development of another point here, why economic growth should be pursued. It is because of the reason that Bangladesh is still one of the least developed countries of the world. So if we want to graduate to a developing economy, we need to have economic growth. If we don't have economic growth, then we cannot be graduated to a developing economy of the world. And the criteria for graduating to a developing economy are GNI per capita. If we have GNI per capita up to a standard given by the United Nations, then we can achieve that. We have got other criteria like Human Asset Index and Economic Vulnerability Index, how vulnerable we are to the economy. So that is also a matter of consideration by the United Nations Special Committee to consider whether Bangladesh could be graduated to a developing economy or not. Then Human Asset Index, that also includes some of the social indicators like education, like childbirth, like mortality rate, etc., like literacy rate, and so on. So these are also to be considered there. So that's why we need economic growth. Development of backward regions. I have mentioned in my handout that development of backward region is one of the objectives for imposition of taxes on different entities. So what does it mean, development of backward regions? That there are, undeveloped or underdeveloped areas in the country. Not all areas are developed as good as Dhaka or Narayanganj or Chittagong. So what about Rangpur? What about Dinajpur? Those areas are not developed that much. What about Bandarban? Bandarban is not at all developed. So what should be done? Because the economic development has to be there in order to improve the situation or the lots of the people there. So the National Board of Revenue, National Board of Revenue has got an SRO, Statutory Regulatory Order, in which it has been said that the people of the tribes, various tribes, that means the tribal people, when they are involved in economic activities, they don't have to pay taxes. So it means that they are encouraged to be involved in business or economic activities, and so that they would be able to improve their fate. And at the same time, if you want to build roads or you make the facility of water, etc., drinking water to the people of those areas, you have to invest in those areas. And if you want to invest in those areas, that will be a developmental activity of the government, and for which the government needs to collect revenue. ensuring price stability. If you want to make the prices stable in the country, you have to impose taxes, because a monopolist, he will fix the price at a much higher rate, because his motive will be to make money out of his business, to make the maximum profit out of his business. So if he wants to do that, he cannot do that because of the regulation of the government. He will be taken to task if he imposes, say, 100%, 100%, 150%, 200% of profit on the cost of goods sold or cost price. So that is not possible for him. In that case, government is actually controlling the prices of the various goods or services, and it is getting stable. So these are the objectives of the imposition of taxes. You can understand whatever you have heard from me. Of course, most of the statements are, I believe that you will be able to write the answer correctly, and there is no problem with that. Then we go for various types of taxes. What are the different types of taxes? Maybe direct tax and indirect tax. That is the broad category of taxes, direct tax and indirect tax. So direct tax, you can define it as a tax whose burden is borne by the same person on whom it is levied. When you see a tax is levied on me or imposed on me, I have to bear the burden. That is, I have to pay the taxes. But sometimes it is not the same, because the burden of tax is not borne by the person on whom tax is levied. It is passed on to others. It is passed on to others means, say for example, when an importer imports goods into the country, he initially pays taxes at the customs point. Then what he does, he actually hands the products to wholesalers or distributors. And then he actually collects back all the import duties he has already paid. So it is not imposed on him, rather it is passed on to others. In that way, it's an indirect tax. And ultimately what happens? When the product is sold out to the consumers